everybody, I am Liz, and today it is time for me to do my March wrap-up and then an April TBR. So March was so much more successful in my reading month than February was, as I've read a total of 6 books and 7 graphic novels. So that's definitely a huge jump from my one read in February and the 3 books I read in January. So without further ado, I am going to jump right in to talking about the books I read this past month. First off the bat is Stormfront by Jim Butcher. This is the first book in the Dresden Files series, which is basically a wizard PI investigating spooky, witchy type crimes of murder and a missing person, and it all winds together. And this book, I do not understand how it took me months to read. I know I started it last year, I think in December, and I just now finished it. So glad I finished it. I absolutely love this world that Jim Butcher has created, and you know, Harry Dresden is an awesome, like, messed up, interesting character, and I can't wait to find out more of his past when I wind up reading more books in this series. So I'm giving this book a 4 out of 5. Now the next book I finished is a comic book, and that is Saga Volume 1. And I read the other 2 volumes, so I'm just going to talk about it all together. So obviously Saga is written and illustrated by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and this book series has such fantastic art in it, and the story is so immersive and interesting. It is about 2 alien races that are been in war for a long time, generations. The 2 main characters are on opposite sides of the team. They're soldiers on opposite sides, and they have fallen in love and have created an adorable baby. They're on the run because multiple people from each side and mercenaries are coming after them. Obviously, I love the story. I love everything about this series, and everybody has raved so much about this series that I finally decided to dive right in. I'm so glad I did. I cannot give the Saga series any more than 5 stars. Next up is a book I have been dying to read since before I bought the book last year, and that is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is a story about this fantastical valley that is being overrun by this evil, haunted, monstrous forest. And the only thing keeping those frightening creatures at bay and the cruelty of the forest is a wizard called Dragon. And every 10 years, he takes a woman, a lady of about 17 years old, away from her family and stores them up in his castle area for 10 years. Now, most of the villagers knows exactly who the dragon is going to pick, except for this year, where our main character Agnieszka knows that her best friend Cassia is going to be taken. However, things don't quite go as planned, and we're just torn into this fantastical book. It is a standalone, which I definitely am saddened by this being a standalone, but I'm also so happy with how it was wrapped up. I don't feel like anything was over-explained or under-explained. I felt like the writing was very clear, and just magical. And so I definitely see why people love this story, and I am one of those that love this story. So I am giving this a 5 out of 5. If you've read Naomi Novik's stories and have some recommendations for other stories, please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to get some more recommendations, or if you know any other stories that are very similar to this one by other authors, I would love to hear it. So the next book I finished is another comic book, and that is The Wicked and the Divine by a whole slew of authors, illustrators, writers, and everything. And basically I read 4 of these editions, and so I'm going to talk about all of them, and they all have their own names. So the first one is called The Faust Act, the second one is called Pandemonium, the third one is called Commercial Suicide, and the fourth one is called Rising Action. Now, a lot of people say that the story is very, very vague as the authors wind and display this story of these 12 gods that come to Earth every 90 years to either be loved or hated by the mortal populace for 2 years, and then they die. So our main character in this story is Laura. She is a mortal who is basically a huge fan of a majority of these gods, and she goes to concerts, and basically she feels very out of place in society, and so that's kind of how she fulfills her place and fulfills her emptiness and loneliness, is by attending these concerts, and her dream is to meet them in person. And basically she gets her wish, and that wish might be a lot more than what she bargained for. And let's just say that the art is gorgeous. I absolutely love the art, and that is my absolute favorite thing about this series, is the art. I do love the lore and learning about these different characters. Now, I do have to say that 1, 2, and 3 are my 5 out of 5 type stories, but sadly the third edition, and I know that it was mostly because they wanted to add more illustrators and artists into the mix of the story. As much as I loved learning about the backstory of all these gods, I just was not a huge fan of how every volume in this edition had a different artist, and the art was drastically different from the other 3 books. So this one was the weakest one out of the 4 that I've read, and so I give it a 3 out of 5. Next up is Genesis by Bernard Beckett. This is a very interesting, kind of dystopian, kind of sci-fi storytelling about the world as we know it being completely gone. The main world powers went to war and destroyed themselves with viruses, bioterrorism, and all of that stuff. So the leaders of this island in Genesis basically took their population, their community, and stowed away on their own private island with their own military, and basically completely isolated themselves from the rest of the world, meaning that they even killed people trying to seek refuge on their island because they were an outsider and they were afraid of bringing the plague to their island. This is several generations after that war, and then a subsequent war after that, and the island is still intact. Our main character, Anaximander, is going to take an exam in order to place in the Academy of this island, and the Academy is basically the rulers, the main decision makers of this island society, and so she really wants to be a part of that decision making process. And in doing so, she has to attend a very rigorous exam about the main area of focus in her studies, and her studies are on the history of the island and the politics that ensued during that war-stricken time. And it was very interesting, definitely threw me through some curves, twists, and loops. It is a very short story of about 150 pages, so even though it is short and really quick to read it, so much is jam-packed into this short story, and I absolutely loved it. I was not expecting its ending. The writing is, again, so clear and concise and just really puts you into wanting to learn more and understand what Anaximander knows. And so I was so pleased with reading this book, and it gets a 5 out of 5. My next read is the one, the only, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, what was really fascinating by me reading specifically the illustrated version is they use the actual British terminology instead of the American terminology that I read as a child, and so that was very fascinating. I definitely loved this story, and I definitely see how some of my friends see that it is the weakest book in the whole Harry Potter series. I still absolutely love this story and love all of the things that Harry finds out and everything like that. I do have to say that with my knowledge of the human anatomy, there are not 33 bones in a human upper arm limb thing. There is 29. Maybe 30 if you count the upper arm bone, the humerus. Other than that, no. But anyway, so I do definitely love the story. And I was actually surprised that a lot of the main ending stuff only takes place in the last like 30 pages. I thought that that was very interesting and kind of counterintuitive from what I thought, because, you know, in the movie, like, Harry and them in the chamber is just so pivotal and so important in the story, but they're only in there for maybe 20 pages, and that is so crazy to really like see how intense and how well that J.K. Rowling just jam-packed everything in this story. So, you know, it's Harry Potter. They're not going to get anything less than a 5, just so you know, because Harry Potter. So the next book I finished, I actually do not have a copy for it because I read it through my e-reader, and that is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Now, this was the next up book for Adam Silvera for me. I have read all 3 of his books that have been currently published. I know I'm going to read more because he is one of my favorite authors, and I absolutely love his futuristic, tad bit sci-fi, but also very much contemporary read that he displays in his stories, and just the friendships and interactions of all the characters. I absolutely love it. I do have to say that everybody says that they cried so much during this book, but I didn't. I surprised myself where I didn't actually cry until the end, and that's because I think I geared myself up so much to hoping that they weren't going to die, even though the book title is They Both Die at the End. So yeah, it was seriously such a good book, and Adam Silvera ceases to amaze me by the intensity of his writing and everything like that. This book, even though I haven't really talked about what it's about two boys, two basically young men who have received a phone call that they are going to die within the next 24 hours. And so it was definitely intense. I really, really loved it. And so my rating of this story is going to be a fantastic 5 out of 5. Now this brings me to the last book I finished in March, and that is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. And I know I've tried for years to read this physical copy, hasn't happened, so I picked up the audiobook and I was not disappointed. Although it's really hard to be invested in a 350-page story that, you know, takes an audiobook 14 hours to go through when you can watch a movie in 2 hours. And the Interview with the Vampire movie is the exact same as this book. The only difference, obviously, is that there is so much more detail jam-packed into this book, and Anne Rice has super flowing, descriptive writing, and she wants to put everything in there. And then there was the end. The end is different from the movie. I will say that. The end is different from the movie, and I definitely preferred this ending than the movie ending, because it made a lot more sense. So I really am glad that I read this book, but I felt like it was just a little too long. It could have been shortened quite a bit. So I am giving this a 3.5 out of 5. So overall, I definitely had a fantastic reading month in March, and I think that is why I read so much, let alone that there was spring break, so I had a whole week off of work and school where I could read. And I really do hope that this ball keeps rolling in April and I'm gonna get a lot read. I might not get, 13 books read in the month of April due to finals, and the fact that the books I want to read in April are some stinking thick books. So whether or not I continue with the Saga and the Wicked and the Divine in April, which I probably will, these are the other books I am going to be reading. First off the bat is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I've already started and I am so invested already, and I've only read 3 chapters. It is about Henrietta Lacks, who is responsible for giving us a lot of medical advancements like the polio vaccine, STD information, cancer research. Her cells are all about that. However, these cells were taken without her consent, without her knowledge, and without her family's knowledge. That seems like a very big injustice, and so I can't wait to read more of this story and become even more invested in this medical ethical dilemma. Next up is Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the 3rd and I believe final story in her Diviners series, and I have been trying to read this since I finished the 2nd book. So I hope it happens. It is a thick book, and I am hoping I get the audiobook for it soon, because I did the audiobook for the 2nd one and flew through it, so I'm hoping it'll be the same for this. And I am about 2 chapters in already, and I'm seriously loving it. Continue on with these Diviners and Evie O'Neill's story. Please give me a great ending. So the next book, I actually recommended one of my friends read it because she is a huge audiobook kick and she really wanted recommendations. So I told her to pick up Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and basically all I heard about it was it's like a Nigerian Harry Potter, and that was all I said to her, to basically say yes, I am going to read it, and she's since been nagging me to pick up this book. This book is super thick, and so I really hope I get to it. I don't know if I will, and I don't know if I'll finish it, but I really hope to, because it's set in this fantastic world, and I know that Tomi Adeyemi did a lot of research in order to create this great masterpiece of a story that everybody has been raving about, so I really want to pop it open. The last book I really want to get to that I've been really excited since I purchased this comic book is Amulet by Kazuo Kibuishi, and I have heard some really great things about this story, and it sounds just so fantastic. It is about two children who go into this dark dimension in order to rescue their mother, and I've looked at the art and I am seriously enthralled and entertained by this type of comic children's read, and so I really want to go into it and pick it up. Thank you guys so much for watching this very lengthy wrap up. Please let me know in the comments down below what you have been reading in March and what you are currently reading for April, and I hope to see you guys next time. So until next time, goodbye!